If my friend would yield
Absolutely.
on the matter
yours.
Of the process. Of course, the process is important, and it's designed for the president and the Congress to work together to solve these problems. I think the process may be broken, which I think points up why we really, bottom line, need a constitutional amendment to require the president to submit a balanced budget and to require this Congress to enact a balanced budget. You know, the president submitted a budget to us. Deficits, as far as the eye could see, the budget, we brought it to a vote under sort of an interesting procedure here. It didn't get one single vote. Not one Republican, not one Democrat would vote for President Obama's budget. We hear rumblings that the chairman of the Senate, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, may be actually about to bring a budget forward. It's been 800 days. We passed the 800-day mark last week. The budget chairman and the budget committee and the process has failed to work to actually bring a budget out to the floor, back from out from behind closed doors, as my friend from Wisconsin had said, and let us vote on all of these procedures. So I would simply say the president's budget was a non-starter. I think if the Senate Democratic version ever were to be devised and brought to the fore, it would be a non-starter, which is why we haven't seen such a proposal in 800 days. Bottom line, Republicans are united on this side in resisting tax increases on our economy at a time when we are at 9.2% unemployment. And we're united, all 47 of us, in saying we need the basic change in the process in this country of enacting a balanced budget amendment, sending that amendment out to the states for ratification. That would be the type of process reform that I think the American people agree that we need.
Madam President, I asked my colleagues, Senator Lee from Utah, who just joined us. His late father was a Solicitor General of the United States, law school dean, and we're glad that Senator Lee has really put a lot of effort in drafting a constitutional amendment, the good lawyer that he is, that would make a difference, I think, for our country. Senator Lee, maybe you would share your thoughts about your observation as a new senator on how things are going and why you believe a constitutional amendment, as Senator Wicker from Mississippi has just said, would be helpful for our country and help put us on a sound path for the future.
Madam President, the need has never been greater for us to avoid gimmicks. Gimmickry in this context can have very high stakes and can prove most detrimental to our economy and to the ability of our government to function. We have to look out for those gimmicks that would say, we're going to make a few cuts now, but most of the cuts we're going to propose in return for our ability to raise the debt limit will involve sacrifices by future Congresses. Not the 112th Congress, we'll just make a few. But we'll say that the 113th and the 114th and successive Congresses after that will make the difficult, necessary sacrifices. We can't do that. Nothing allows us to bind a future Congress. That's why we need something that's gimmick-free. That's why we need to amend our law of laws, the U.S. Constitution, to place important, meaningful, permanent restrictions on the ability of Congress to engage in perpetual, reckless deficit spending, of the sort that has produced a national debt now fast approaching $15 trillion, to a degree that is escalating now at a rate in excess of $1.5 trillion every single year. In order to change the problem, we have to change the root causes. We have to change the ability of Congress to exercise its authority that it has so severely abused in recent decades under Clause 2 of Article 1, Section 8, to engage in deficit spending. A balanced budget amendment, the balanced budget amendment that's been endorsed and embraced and co-sponsored by all 47 Republicans in the Senate, will do just that. We've got a growing number of Republicans, a couple dozen, who have now gotten behind the one proposal that would allow us to approach the debt limit with this in mind and would require the balanced budget amendment to be part of that. And I urge my colleagues to support that.
I thank you, Senator Lee, for your leadership and hard work on that. It's not an easy thing to draft something that people would all agree with, but you've got I think the Republicans have signed on to that, you and your colleagues, and we are happy for that, and I believe that this is not an impossible dream. When I came to the Senate in 1997, we had a vote on the balanced budget amendment. It fell one vote short. We had 66, it required 67. How much better off would we have been today? How much less debt would we have placed on our children and grandchildren had that amendment been passed then? So I do think it's time for a national discussion again on this issue and to make that change, and would like to point out something about the debt that we now have. Unemployment rate came in disappointingly with only 18,000 jobs created last month in June. We look to have 150,000 just to stay level. Unemployment went up. Economic growth in the first quarter was expected to be much higher than it came in. It came in, I think the first number was 1.8. Maybe it's been revised to 2%. The Rogoff-Reinhardt study that studied debt defaults in countries all over the world for 8 centuries, a highly respected study. Secretary Geithner, the Treasury Secretary, said it's an excellent study, and in some ways it underestimates the risk. This study says that when your debt reaches 90% of the economy, 90% of the gross domestic product, it pulls down economic growth by 1 to 2%. We are now at 95% debt to GDP. We'll be at 100% of debt to GDP by the end of this year. I believe that our growth could have been 3% instead of 2% first quarter. I believe, and 1% growth, according to the Obama White House, Christine Romer, economic advisor, amounts to 1 million jobs created. So I believe we've lost 1 million jobs that could have been created. We've lost additional tax revenue and growth and prosperity that would help us deal with our debt because of the debt. You see, you can't keep borrowing. Maybe when our debt to GDP was 30%, maybe that's what it was when Senator Wicker probably came to Congress. Now we're at 100%. Our debt is as large as the entire productivity of our economy, and economists tell us that it's pulling down our growth. And it's costing jobs. And Americans are not working today because of debt. And what we hear is, don't worry about it, deficits really don't matter. Senator Wicker, you've been here in the House and in the Senate. Have you seen a situation in which our financial crisis, short-term and long-term, systemically, is more severe than it is today?
Well, I think, I guess I got to the House in 1995. My friend from Alabama came to the Senate 2 years later. I don't think we could have imagined an annual deficit of $1.5 trillion in one short year. We are spending that much more than we're taking in. In other words, we take in $2.2 trillion a year approximately, and we spend $3.7 trillion a year, a difference of $1.5 trillion. I don't think we ever expected it to get that serious when the senator from Alabama and I first got here. And clearly, there's no way we can turn back the clock, but the senator is correct. If we had enacted with just one more vote in this very body a constitutional amendment to balance the budget, clearly we would not be facing this fiscal crisis. But I want to also make a very important point, and it's what all the the papers are talking about, and that's whether somehow a tax increase targeted to deficit reduction is the thing to do. Listen, my friends, Republicans and Democrats over time, until recently, have been united in saying tax increases are a bad thing to do. And I want to ask my colleagues if any of you can help identify the public official who said this quote, "The last thing you want to do is to raise taxes in the middle of a recession because that would take more demand out of the economy and put businesses in a further hole," unquote. Now, would any of my colleagues care to guess, Senator Lee?
That was President Obama in the middle of 2009 who made that comment.
Absolutely. Somehow, the president, who made a very cogent and correct statement in 2009, has completely changed his tune now. We could have a budget deal in place on the floor of the House and Senate and ready to be passed if the President of the United States would simply come back to the position that he took in 2009 and 2010. As late as December of 2010, the President was telling the New York Daily News that we should keep the tax rates in place. The budget chairman in the Senate told Reuters last July, only a year ago, that he supported extending the tax cuts and keeping them in place because to raise taxes on the private sector during a time of economic downturn is taking money out of the private sector and killing their ability to create jobs. So I would simply call on my colleagues from the other side of the aisle to return to the position that they had a year ago and 2 years ago. Let's get a budget deal that addresses the debt by cutting spending and go and be united as we were on that issue some year and 2 years ago.
Senator Johnson.